Welcome to the August 2025 Homestead Huddle. This is our place to gather, to get together, to strategize while also kind of answering questions and addressing topics that are relevant this month for homesteaders, food foresters, farmers, or hobby farmers all over the United States. So hopefully you'll enjoy this little bit of time that we'll carve out together. About 30 or 40 minutes is usually about how long we go. The structure of today's huddle, just like every other month, first we'll take a few minutes and look at the top 3 things that you could be or should be doing right now in your growing zone. And we'll kind of group these in clumps, zones 3 through 8, the colder climate, the temperate climate, in zones 9 through 11, the subtropical or dry arid climates. Then once we're finished with those top 3 things to focus on, we'll get into questions this month that other permaculturists, hobby farmers, and food foresters are looking at on their own farm. Now, these questions come every month from our Patreon community. So these are real questions from real people, real homesteaders, and the things that they're looking at this month and going, man, how do I address these couple different areas? So if you are wanting to be a part of that community, you can go to patreon.com/PermacultureFX to find out more information there on the massive list of classes, PDFs, documents, resources, and the homestead mentorship that we do there on Patreon. So let's go ahead and begin this month with the top 3 things to be doing if you live in USDA growing zones 3 through 8. So this could be northern Michigan, could be Kansas City or Minnesota or Iowa, or even North Georgia. If you live in those more temperate or cold temperate climate zones, there's a lot you could be doing this month. Now, granted, the longer list of these you can find on PermacultureFX.com. It's totally free. You don't have to put in your email unless you want the notification every month that it's been live. But if you want to boil down that list to 3 things, here's the 3 things to do for USDA zones 3 through 8. So the first thing that you want to be thinking about this month, especially weeks 1 and 2, even into week 3 of the month, is getting your fall and winter wildlife food plots in the ground. So you're thinking of feeding deer or turkey or pheasant or ducks or whatever, those woodland style animals, permaculture zones, in your yard 3, 4, and 5. Maybe you're hunting. Maybe you just want a wildlife sanctuary. This is your time to get those fall crops in the ground. So you're doing beets, purple top turnips, you're doing radishes, daikon radishes, clover, all of those kind of pre-fall crops that really need to get going. Go ahead and get those in the ground now by seeding, no-till drill, hand seeding, and then low dragging over the top. But this is the time to go ahead and get those things in the ground. Now, the second thing to focus on, very similar vein, is you want to start your winter crops. I know it's so weird to think about that. Kids are going back to school. It's still really hot. It's August, and you're thinking, why am I getting winter crops in the ground? It's time, in those colder climate zones, you've only got another month or so left of the warm weather. So you want to give those things a really good opportunity to root in, because a lot of those winter crops, they're roots, you know what I mean? So get in the beets, the brassicas, kale, lettuces, all of those cold season crops need to be planted by seed now. Most of them, you don't really need to start in the greenhouse or in the hoop house. Technically you could, but it's really not necessary. Those mostly can be direct sown. Same thing with like your winter peas, the snap peas, snow peas. Those can be direct sown, and it is time. I'm really, really sorry. It's just, I was talking to my parents the other day, and it's so hard this time of year. It's 90 degrees for some of you right now. And so to be thinking of cold climate and cold season crops is like just painful to the soul. Oh, brace yourself. So third thing that I would be doing is it's time for fall soil amending if you're in those cold climate zones. So those of us that are in the warm climates, we've got another month and a half. So we're not really thinking about amending our soil at all right now. But in those cold climate zones, now is the time to be focusing on the root growth and putting those plants to bed. So you're not doing anything that's going to cause a lot of green growth right now. So no nitrogen, not really any phosphorus. So we're really focusing on azomite, minerals, silica, Epsom salts, rock dust, things that are really going to help those plants harden off going into the winter months. So even doing things that are higher in potassium, that's going to be okay. But I want to stay away from those first two numbers on the NPK scale this time of year because we're really putting things to bed. So if you're going to be amending this time of year in zones 3 through 8, think Epsom salts, azomite, minerals, and rock dust are going to be the kind of primary, green sand maybe. Those are going to be the primary things that we're going to be doing. So that's your plan, USDA zones 3 through 8. So get ready, cold season is coming. So if you are in USDA zones 9 through 11, the things that we're going to be focusing on the month are really getting ready for gardening season and embracing food forest season, and honestly embracing the air conditioning because it is insanely hot right now. It's insanely hot. It's just sticky and gross. It's like covering up with this nasty wet blanket. So in USDA zones 9 through 11, we are doing three things right now, primarily this month. Number one is it is time for late summer chop and drop. So your chop and drop bamboo leaves, pigeon pea, Mexican sunflower, daisy tree, all of those things that we want to start building our soil, chop it, drop it, chop it, drop it. You might even get one or two more times before the winter months. Now for me, when it gets to be end of October, 1st of November, I'm done chopping and dropping because I want that biomass to be a protection from the colder winter winds. But this time of year, I'm chop and dropping as much as possible. So as soon as the plant gets to be 6 or 8 feet tall, moringa, same one, 6 or 8 feet tall, I'm chopping it and dropping it. You can go all the way down to the ground and coppice it, or you can chop and drop it at 3 to 4 feet tall. That's pollarding or pollarding. So, whatever your strategy or your look and feel is, get on the chop and drop. Do not wait. You want to be cycling those nutrients as much as possible. So pigeon pea, Mexican sunflower, moringa, bamboo leaves, get on it, get on it. Second thing that we're focusing on right now is we are finally starting to get ready for vegetable season. So the end of this month, the last week of the month, start your nightshades, your heat-tolerant annual vegetables, your tomatoes, your eggplants, your peppers. Those are going to start going in our seed trays toward the end of the month. Do not start them now. It's way too hot, way too humid. Don't even worry about it now. But the end of the month, we do want to start our heat-tolerant things in seed trays. They're not going to go in the ground for another 6-8 weeks yet, but I do want to get them started in seed trays. So in September, 1st of October, then I'm finally ready to put them in the ground, which brings me to the third thing that we're doing this month. Finish your raised beds. So if you are wanting to do a fall and winter garden, listen carefully. You are in the last window to get your raised beds and your new in-ground annual vegetable beds ready. It is not a good idea to rush and do this in September because the soil hasn't settled, the nutrients are cycling, there is a process of going through nitrate and nitrite to ammonia and letting all of that stuff settle. September is not going to be your time to get new annual vegetable gardens ready. So I know it's hot, I know it's sticky, I know it's gross, but take it slow, take it easy. This is the time, this is the window to get the new annual vegetable beds ready. So I promise you, in a month, there will be 10 more people going, oh, what do I do this month to start a new garden bed? Well, you should have started last month. So this is the window. Embrace it. Embrace the heat. It sucks, but embrace the suckiness. It's just gross outside, so take it in small doses. Get out early in the morning, do a couple things, and you will be very, very glad when that time comes. And I would say also as a bonus for both growing zones, a bonus item to do this month, Probably propagating and air layering are going to be, my honorable mentions of the month. So think like mulberries. Even if you're in the colder climate zones, you've still got 8 weeks before frost. You do have time, 8 or even 12 weeks before frost. You've got time to go ahead and start some air layering, start some propagating. I'm doing a ton of mulberries right now. So those of you that are in the Patreon community, brace yourselves. There's a class coming up on propagating mulberries in different soils and different lighting scenarios and hoods versus tarps versus open air and spritzing and lots of spreadsheets. So that's my bonus for both this month of things that we want to be focusing on in our growing zones. So now is the time to get nerdy. Get your coffee, put your earbuds in. We're going to jump into the questions. Now, these questions, again, are from our Patreon family, the Farm Fam. These are real questions from real homesteaders and the things that they're thinking about this month. And, you could go onto a Facebook group and get answers, but I promise you, you're going to get a really wide, broad spectrum. And unfortunately, the people that are usually sitting down answering questions in these social media groups, they have a lot of time on their hands. They're keyboard warriors. They may not have the experience where you are. They may not have the years of experience, the educational experience. So I think that's why it's so important for us to sit down in a way that we can dialogue. That's why I love the private chat and Patreon because they're not a bunch of keyboard warriors. They're people that are putting in the time. They're out in the farm. They're in the food forest. They're in the garden. Some of us are super nerdy. We're doing soil testing and microscope work and all of that sort of thing. So yes, you could go to those places. I would rather have an intelligent dialogue with a smaller group of people than kind of sorting through the keyboard warrior Facebook Karen comments. Ain't nobody got time for that. So let's go ahead and jump into these 10 questions. I've got my notebook here because there's 10 really, really good questions, and these questions have some really interesting layers to them. I think the ones that I'm most excited about this month, question number 1 is a really, really big one. And so that one to me is that's a doozy. And question number 8, I think are my top 2 questions I'm the most excited about this month. So I've got my coffee, and you'll have to forgive me for my occasional sips so I can stay hydrated. Full of energy and life from my dark holy water here. So let's go ahead and jump into these questions. So question number 1 is a pretty in-depth question. So we're going to take this as a short answer and then do the more in-depth answer for those that want to go deeper. If you don't want the long version, you can fast forward to question number 2. So question number 1, how do I reset a food forest? August for most of us is the time of year when we're looking at our food forest and we're going, wow, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of fruit, there's a lot of berries, there's a lot of productions, and there's a lot of weeds. There's a lot of things that I did not plant there. I don't even know what that is. There's so much to do. How do I tackle a food forest that is needing some maintenance, shall we say? August is a great time to reset. So if you want the short answer, here's the 3 steps for your short answer. First, cycle your nutrients. Second, cover the soil. And third, reshape and prune. So you're cycling nutrients, you're covering the soil, and then you're reshaping and you're pruning. So that is the short, condensed Reader's Digest version of that answer. And I've got my notebook here so we can kind of work through a little bit of a process. So if you want the longer answer of that, I want to take each of those 3, expand and expound on them a little bit so you can kind of navigate through this journey on your own. And yes, this is doable for you. Even if your food forest is massive. I was at a friend's house the other day, a previous client, and they have 5 agroforestry rows that are 170 feet long each. Now, yes, that is a lot, but you can do this. You can do it as an individual. You can do it as a family. But if you don't want to do that, then you can hire someone. I'll come and bring a team to your house and we'll reset your food forest for you, because I know sometimes it's easier to steward it once it's already been reset. But it is doable for you. So if you want to do this on your own, here's how we do it. So the first thing is cycling your nutrients. Now you can cycle nutrients in a lot of different ways. The goal in cycling is basically we're taking the things above the ground and we're putting them on or underground again. Taking the things that are above the ground, putting them on top of the soil or into the soil. And we want to repeat that cycling process as much as humanly possible. So you can do that through chop and drop, and that could be just laying them down on top of the soil. Maybe you bury them with wood chips, maybe you don't. Now, if you don't bury them, you're not going to get as much nitrogen, but you're going to still get the biomass. You're still going to get the minerals. You're still going to be sequestering a lot of that stuff. So it's okay. If you don't have time to bury it, don't worry about it. Just chop it, drop it, put it around the base of the fruit trees, and you're still going to be okay. You could also mow it. You could weed whack it. And honestly, mowing and weed whacking is a great way to cycle nutrients, especially if you've got 2 agroforestry rows, mow in between them. Just run that zero-turn mower. It's the adult version of a go-kart. Put your headphones in and just mow and consider it, lazy man's chop and drop. And it really does work. Weed whacking is the same way. Now, the downside is you're not always going to miss all of your plants that you love. But sometimes weed whacking and mowing is honestly the best way. You could hand weed it. You could literally dig them up by the roots and then decide, do I want to throw that down where it is and risk it re-rooting? Do I want to throw the weed buckets on the compost pile? Do I want to throw the weeds into the chickens? That's what I usually do. You could do a controlled burn. You could use your propane torch. Do a controlled burn in an area, have proper safety protocol in place. You could solarize it, roll out the clear 3M plastic, solarize it for 6 or 8 weeks, just walk away, come back, and it's been reset for you. You could do animal rotations, controlled. I don't want usually animals running free in the food forest now. Ducks, okay, they do great in the middle of the food forest. They do great in the orchard. Chickens are going to make a mess. Cows are going to, trample a lot of stuff. They're going to eat your good stuff. Goats will eat everything. But you can control do it. Here's your 2 agroforestry rows. Set up your solar or your electric fencing in between and run those chicken tractors, run the livestock down those rows. It is very doable to use animals as a way to cycle nutrients. Now, the good thing about animals doing it is they are composting immediately. So the chickens they're composting machines. They're eating all those weeds. They're eating the greens. They're eating the bugs, and they're pooping out fertilizer for you. What a fantastic way to cycle those nutrients. So that's our longer version of how you cycle. Now, how do you cover the soil? Now, again, there's a lot of ways to do that second step and cover your soil. You could do that through chop and drop, literally cutting Mexican sunflower, the bamboo leaves, or even the younger bamboo canes, the pigeon peas, the honey locust, the black locust, the senna family, the beans. You can chop and drop till nobody's business, or like nobody's business, and that will cover your soil. Now, the weeds can come up through that, so that is a risk that you've got to be willing to take. You could also plant new plants or ground covers to cover the soil. So remember, if you don't cover the soil up, nature is going to. And almost always, nature introduces a succession of species plant, which we would consider a weed. So if you don't cover it up by chop and drop, you could do new plants as the succession of species. So if you're in zones 3 through 8, right now, I'd be planting clover, red clover, Durana clover, white clover, Dutch clover, yellow clover, crimson. Any of the clover family. That's a little bit of a cooler season. They like to stay moist. Get the clover in the ground. And that's a great cover crop or smother crop. If you're in zones 9 through 11, right now, your smother crop could be sunshine mimosa. It could be perennial peanut. It could be cow peas. So those are some of the ones that we would use right now as our smother crop. So if you are chop and dropping, great. Cover your soil. If you are planting new things or ground covers, great. Those are your options. Or you could always do it by bringing in other dead matter like wood chips, straw, grass clippings are great. If you've got a mower, whether it's a push mower or a rider that has a bagger on it, what a fantastic way to just cycle nutrients. That soil is going to love you for grass clippings, leaf clippings that have been chopped up or whatever, so they decompose faster. And then I guess the last way that you could cover that soil is by broadcasting a multi-species plot, like native grasses, native wildflowers. You don't have to have a perfect wood chipped area. Now, if it's your front yard or a side yard or you're in suburbia, you may not want the field look. But if it's in, permaculture zones late 2, 3, or 4, why not have native grasses and wildflowers around your fruit trees? I don't necessarily want them directly around the base where they're competing for nutrients, but having wildflowers and native grasses in my rows, letting grasses grow up to knee high or even taller, is incredible for the native ecosystem. That's how you're gonna, get the dragonflies that are gonna control mosquitoes. You're creating biodiversity for praying mantises, for fireflies. That's giving habitat for nature to be nature. So again, the step of this is cycle the nutrients, cover your soil. A lot of ways to do both of those. And then the last step in that process, this is your moment to reshape and prune. Now, I realize most fruit trees want to be dormant when we're pruning, but there are some things that you can prune kind of year round. They're a very tough, very resilient plant. Mulberries are one of them, persimmon. Those are gonna be okay to go ahead and prune now. I'm not pruning avocados. I'm not pruning mangoes. I'm not pruning anything that has a lot of sap flowing in them. Peaches, pears, nectarines, plums, gonna wait until dormancy. But if you know you're gonna be busy, then I guess this is your second best time to do it, because a lot of things have a semi-dormancy in zones 9 through 11 this time of year. So a lot of you are probably seeing peach trees yellowing or turning orange right now. They're not sick, they're just going into a semi-dormancy. Along the lines of reshaping, don't just think reshaping the branches. Think about reshaping your edges. So you're reshaping the garden paths. You're creating a buffer zone. I like, creating a buffer zone, especially with that blowtorch and using that propane torch to create a burned gap between your grass and the lawn, or your rows from the agroforestry rows of the food forest. It helps prevent that torpedo grass, centipede grass, Bermuda grass from going into your food forest. So creating that dead zone really it makes a huge, huge difference on the overall maintenance in general. And then I would say, as you're creating those lines again, fill in your gaps. Look at your food forest and go, okay, I've got a good top story. I've got maybe some ground cover. Where am I missing? Look for the gaps in your system, because remember, nature, God is going to fill in the gaps. It's going to bring in weeds or another succession of species. So you might as well fill that gap with something else. If you've got a really good top story and a really good herbaceous layer, consider a berry bush, consider a chop and drop plant, consider a little bit of a taller medicinal plant like echinacea. So think of something that will fill in those gaps, because generally speaking, this was in a class that we did recently for Patreon, the greatest amount of life, abundance, and fruitfulness is on the edges between systems. We call it the ecotone. So not really in the forest and not really in the field, but that place right in between, that 10 to 20 feet between a field and a forest, that ecotone is where there's the most diversity of species, both plants, animals, birds, and feather friends. That's where the greatest life is. So look for those transitional spaces in your system, recreate edges, and fill in those gaps along the way. So again, when we reset our food forest, we're cycling our nutrients, we're covering our soil, and we're reshaping and we're pruning, and that is a great way to do a reset. So question number 2 this month, this is a really fun, kind of nerdy one. Have you found that adding beneficial nematodes actually help the soil? Short answer, yes. All the bacteria, all the nematodes, all the probiotics, all that microorganisms that you can add to the soil, it's going to make a difference. Are you going to see the difference? Sometimes, yes. Sometimes you'll see it with your eyes, you'll feel it in the soil structure, you'll see it in the growth of the plants. But many times what happens microscopically with our biology in the soil Sometimes we don't always see it with the bare human eye. So when we look at nematodes specifically, this is a massive scientific kingdom. There are 27,000 nematodes that have been named, about 27,000 that have been named and identified. That is a lot of nematodes. Scientists estimate that there are over 1 million. I mean, we barely scratched the surface of the kingdom of nematoda. So when you look at those 27,000 that have been identified, of those 27,000, there's only about 4,000 of them, so a very small percentage of the 27,000. 4,000 is a microscopic percentage of 1 million that are estimated. Only about 4,000 of them are plant parasitic nematodes that are going to attach onto the roots of your plants and maybe possibly do damage. So when we look at those nematodes, we often kind of categorize all nematodes as bad. We stereotype all nematodes as bad, and they're really not. You know, there's only a very, very few that are super harmful to our plants. Root knot nematodes are the one that everybody talks about, and we think all nematodes are bad. They're really not. Root knot nematodes are doing their job. Their basic job is to take a plant that is struggling or not native, which usually happens to be an annual vegetable, and they compost it in place in order to build the soil. So the kingdom of nematoda, it's not a bad thing to have in our soil. I mean, they're actually crucial for decomposition and composting. They're going to be probably more important to building soil structure than even bacteria, than probiotics in the soil. So when we look at nematodes, they're really not all bad. So I would say adding beneficial nematodes, what we would call beneficial nematodes to your soil, they're definitely going to help, specifically if you have a lot of matter on your soil, biomass, chop and drop, that you want to decompose quickly. Now, if you have bare soil, your garden soil is exposed, which you should never do. If you have bare soil in one of your garden beds, adding nematodes is going to do about 2 things, jack and squat. It ain't going to do nothing. I mean, maybe it'll do something minor. Primarily, those nematodes are composters and they're decomposers. So that's the place where they're going to be the most beneficial. Now, if you want to get super nerdy, you don't need a very strong microscope to be able to see and identify the nematode action in your soil. You could use, just a regular couple $100 microscope, and basically your setting on the microscope, I would set your objective at 40 times, and then your eyepiece lens at 10 times. So you're going to get a 400 times magnification, and that's going to allow you to be able to see nematodal action. Now, are you or I going to be able to identify with clarity what exact nematode species that is? Probably not. But we will be able to see the nematode activity in the soil. If you're wanting to identify them specifically, that's a soil biology course. Dr. Elaine Ingram does a phenomenal job. I've taken a couple of hers, and they are amazing at looking at the soil biology. So I think when we look back at that question, have you found adding beneficial nematodes actually help? Yes. How do you manage the bad nematodes, the root knot nematodes? Because I think that's the other part of the question. Add organic matter. Add humic acid to the soil, add biomass, because really the job of the bad nematodes is to improve the soil quality. If you do that for them, the good nematodes will inhabit that good soil biology, and the bad nematodes are going to go on and find other bad soil. So I would focus on building the probiotics in your soil, focus on building the organic matter and the biomass. So it's one line of a lot of things that you can do to build your soil biology. Question number 3. I have had elderberries for a few years. They have lots of flowers, very prolific greens, but they have no berries. What am I doing wrong? You're probably not doing anything wrong. So there's a couple things to think about when we have any plant in general. So this is true for elderberry, this is true for a peach, and true for an avocado. If you have flowers and no fruit, first I would say look at pollination. Do you have bees, butterflies, moths, flies that are pollinating the plant, because without proper pollination, you're not going to get the fruit. The second thing that I would look at is checking your level of potassium in your soil, because that is the primary nutrient, not the only, but the primary nutrient that takes us from flower budding to fruit set. So if there's a fruit abortion and it's dropping the fruit, it could be a potassium deficiency. And I would say the third thing is just consider it might be taking a year off. Most fruit trees and berry bushes, if you have a really prolific year, you get a lot of fruit that year, you can almost bet your bottom dollar that the next year is going to be a little bit weak. And that's okay. I mean, that's like us. If you do a really hard workout on Saturday, Sunday, you're probably going to need to rest. Or in my case, probably Monday and half the day Tuesday, So it's okay for your plants to take a year off. It doesn't mean you did anything wrong. In fact, it could mean you did something right. It's, when you're building muscle mass, you strain or have micro tears in those muscle fibers in order to build that mass with your soil, with your plants. If a plant has a really prolific year, hey, that's an indicator that you have grown your soil. Your soil structure is alive, it's thriving. Congratulations, your tree was able to produce abundantly for you. But it's okay to let it have a rest, let it have a little bit of a Sabbath. Even in like Jewish culture and tradition, they do a Sabbath year where they let the soil rest every 7 years. The Mennonite and Amish community do it. Many agriculture or agrarian societies have full years where they let different plots rest. I would even go as far to encourage you, if you have cattle, every year, let one area of your farm or of your pastures totally rest. And that is okay. So elderberries specifically, if you have flowers and no fruit, it could be pollination, could be potassium, or it could just be a good rest year. Question number 4. How do we prepare our garden beds when it's hot? This person I know is in Central Florida. Guys, it is so hot right now. I mean, it is absolutely brutal. And I know it's really hard to think about giving yourself to annual raised bed prep. But as I said earlier, right now is your last window, especially if you're in USDA zones 9 through 11. You are in the last 2, maybe 3 weeks of getting your annual raised beds ready for the fall, because September, October, you need to be planting. Now, why is this your last window? Practically speaking, if you're doing a new bed, the moment you add in the new soil, or if you're doing hugelkultur, if you're adding in compost or manure, those nutrients are being exposed to a lot of air as you're cycling them in. So as you're dumping those bags of compost in, you're activating the bacteria in the soil, you're activating the probiotics, those aerobic microbes are really starting to thrive. So microbial activity reaches a crescendo. That is not the time to plant. It gets hot, literally both in nutrients, but also in temperature, because you're adding in that nutrient. So if you try doing your raised beds, assembling them and planting them right in there within a week or 2, you're probably going to burn your seeds or burn the roots, both chemically and via temperature. So you want to get your raised beds in now, get them ready now, so that you can plant them in 6 weeks or in 8 weeks. They really just need to sit. The nutrients need to cycle. You need to let the probiotics kind of go through their system. Think about it like setting up a new fish tank, which I love fish. If I, was able to right now, I would set up a fish tank in a heartbeat for like 11 different reasons. But, so it's like doing a fish tank. When you first fill up a fish tank, you want the nitrate, ammonia cycle to have 3 or 4 weeks before you add in the fish. If you add in the fish to water that you've just put in that tank, they're going to die. Like, even a lot of times you put in the tough fish, like just those cheap goldfish, they're probably going to die. They're not able to survive the nutrient cycling. The same is true with your plants. It needs to have 2, 3, 4 weeks before you plant directly in it. So how do you set up those garden beds when it's hot? Slowly but surely. Take one step tomorrow. And maybe tomorrow you're only outside for 30 minutes. Beloved, that's great. What a great amount of time to get outside early in the morning or right before sunset and be done. And if you do a little bit today, a little bit tomorrow, a little bit the next day, those steps count. Don't discount small beginnings. Don't put pressure on yourself to feel like you have to get your raised beds done in one day. It can be a 2 or 3 week process, and that's okay. That's totally fine. So take it slowly. So I would say 3 things that I would do. Number 1, consider hugelkultur, whether that is in a raised bed or the in-ground beds. Hugelkultur is like layer mulching, big stuff, logs, sticks, that sort of thing at the bottom, all the way up to the small stuff. So maybe you're doing logs, then you're doing sticks and branches, then you're doing leaves that have high carbon, then you're doing some straw, then you're doing some compost and manure, then you're doing some worm castings, then you're doing some topsoil, then maybe a little more compost, so you're layer mulching. So think about it as a lasagna where you want the big stuff on the bottom and the little stuff on the top, and then let it sit. Just let it sit. The second thing I would say is think about adding a lot of probiotics and a lot of nitrogen, because that's going to be the 2 primary things that are going to help this really cycle. So mix in your probiotics. I use BioAg. You could use Korean natural farming probiotics, which are primarily anaerobic, but you can activate them in oxygen by putting in an aeration stone with a little bit of what's it called? You make cookies out of it. Molasses. So you could add in a little bit of molasses and just let it bubble overnight. Then you're going to turn that into a primarily aerobic solution, better for your garden. And then add in nitrogen. So add in blood meal. Add in a lot of grass clippings that have been finely chopped. So that's really going to help that system. If you're doing it in ground and getting your new beds ready, probably the best thing to do right now is if you know you want raised beds and you're putting them in the ground, solarize it. Get the chickens where you want them to be working. Let them clear the soil. And honestly, put the chickens on there, quote, slightly too long. So normally when we rotate the solution or rotate the chickens, we want them to rotate until they get down almost to the soil. We still want to see the green. Nope. If you want a raised bed there, let them dig the heck out of it. Let them poop there a lot. Clean out the chicken coop, scrape it out, clean out the nesting boxes, do all of that while they're on those raised bed spots, and then let it sit, because you want those nutrients to cycle. Specifically with the chicken manure, the ammonia needs to cycle and needs a few weeks of rainy season before you could or should be planting things directly on it. The other danger, if you don't let it sit long enough, specifically with manure, the chicken poop or whatever you're using, is if you plant directly in it, not only could you burn your plants, but you're also risking bad bacteria, E. coli, salmonella, E. pylori getting into the human system. And that's, not a good thing. So question number 5. What is the best place to put a banana? This person is in Central Florida. I would say I'm not able to give you the exact location on your property, because that really is an it depends scenario. I would have to see the property, look around, what's our sun exposure, what's our soil type. Let me get a drink of coffee. But in general, for bananas, think 4 or more hours of sunlight. Can you do it in shade? Yes, they will fruit. They'll take a year or so longer. Lots of moisture, so lots of water, whether that's the soil is just retaining the moisture, or it's at a place where you are able to water it, or it's near a watering tank where you can empty or clean out your watering tank. Maybe it's near a pond clean out. The other thing I would consider for bananas for best placement would be where can you give them a lot of food the most? If you don't feed your bananas will not feed you. You're going to have really green plants, but you're probably not going to get great fruit sets. So feed your bananas, they'll feed you. So they need lots of continuous moisture in the soil and lots of continuous food. So maybe you're doing a banana circle, and there's a free link at PermacultureFX.com to show you how to do a banana circle. Maybe it's by a stall of your horses or your cows that you're doing stall clean out, and you're able to throw that in that area. Maybe it's by a compost bin. Maybe it's by your vermicomposting bins, and you're able to just add nutrients a lot. So best place for bananas, 4 or more hours of sun, lots of moisture, and lots of food. Question number 6. Question number 6. What is the best place for a tropical cherry, specifically a Barbados cherry? I would say medium soil alkalinity. So you're not doing super acidic under pine trees. You're not doing super alkaline that's in pure clay. So kind of go middle of the road there. 4 to 6 hours of sunlight, veering near toward the 6. They're going to need a little bit more to have the adequate fruit set on those, and somewhere where it can dry out in between watering. So they do not like continuously wet feet. So those tropical cherries, so we're thinking Barbados cherry, Suriname cherry, Patangatuba, yellow star cherry, Grumichama, cherry of the Rio Grande, Savannah cherry. They all like to dry out. Jaboticaba, they like to dry out in between those waterings. So that's where I would do the tropical cherry. Question number 7. Wood chipping doesn't seem to be working for my scenario. And they listed a few reasons within Patreon. What are some other options other than wood chipping the entire food forest? I would start by saying you don't need to wood chip your food forest forever. I think starting by wood chipping your food forest is excellent because it helps get the fruit trees established. It prevents moisture evaporation and helps with moisture retention. And it resets your soil. It gives you the initial boost of nitrogen or of nutrients. It helps bring in the organic matter. It helps provide a place for worms and other microorganisms to thrive. You don't need to wood chip forever in order to have a successful food forest. I think that is a phenomenal way to get it started. But as time goes on, you shouldn't need all external inputs into your system. You shouldn't need to be bringing in wood chips for 35 years. Now, could you? Yes. And I think there are places that it's very appropriate, like a front yard food forest, a food forest that's right outside your back window, a more decorative or formal fence line food forest. Those are really beautiful places to keep it formal. And I think wood chipping is appropriate. It's right. It is beautiful. It's appealing to the eye in those scenarios. But if you have a food forest that's a little bit further out, don't feel like you have to be wood chipping forever. Should you be covering your soil forever? Yes, but that's a very different question. So in the scenario with this question, if wood chipping isn't working for you, maybe you can't get the wood chips. Maybe the wood chips are just out of the budget right now. Maybe it's just too much manual labor and you don't have a tractor. Maybe you don't like weeding the wood chips. Those are all great reasons to ask the question, what else could I do other than wood chips? So a couple things. I would say start the process by still wood chipping around the canopy of the tree. So go out to the edge of the drip line. So drip line is where the last branch is, straight down. That's your drip line. Create a circle around the edge. Start by still wood chipping there. That's a great place to go. You know what? I can still do this much. All the rest of that area, just cover your soil. Covering your soil could be with wildflowers. It could be sunshine mimosa, perennial peanut. Could be a smother crop like buckwheat or the clover family. It could be an annual ryegrass. So just cover your soil. Or you could solarize those areas in rotation or rotate chicken tractors through those systems. As soon as the chickens work that soil down, move them forward, go back and mow or weed whack that area and move forward and just let it be a grassy run that kind of goes through your agroforestry system. So don't feel like you have to be wood chipping every area forever. The key is cover your soil. Create that covering, protect the microbiology in your soil, protect the probiotics, the good nematodes, the earthworms, protect the biology of the soil, and that's the goal. The goal is not wood chipping. Wood chipping helps with the goal of protecting the soil, but it's not the only way to do it. It's really, I think, is the fastest and easiest way to start, but should we stay there? No, you don't have to stay there. Now in a front yard, again, yes. So question number 8, my avocado is in trouble. What do I do? And I would say you can replace the word avocado there with mango, peach tree, fruit tree, apple tree, whatever you got. You can replace that with whatever. So I think one of the first things that we notice when a tree is in trouble, the leaves start falling off or browning. And I think the first thing that we need to do is assess why. Why is this happening to my tree? And you may or may not get an answer to that, because the answer might be below your soil. I think a lot of times when people post a picture on a social media group like Facebook, the danger is everybody goes, too much water, too little water. Okay, what is it? Here's the reality. Too much water and too little water look identical on the leaves. There is almost no differentiation with what's going on above the ground between too little or too much. So how do you figure it out? Well, you can't by looking at a picture. You have to actually get your hands in the soil. Let's figure out what's going on. So first, let's look at the soil. Do I have too much, too little water? How do I find out? Finger test. Get your hands in the soil. Pull the wood chips back, pull the mulch back. Get your hands in the soil. If it's damp, wet, smells a little stanky, then it's too much water and you probably have root rot. The way you address that is very different than if you've had too dry soil. So you just cannot diagnose it by a picture, 2 or 3, or even a video. You literally cannot do it. So get your hands in the soil. If you've got root rot, number one, let that soil dry out. Make sure there's good airflow around it. I'm not going to tent it, but just stop watering yourself. The next time you do water, use something like hydrogen peroxide, like 1 cup per gallon of water of hydrogen peroxide in a water solution, and water around the drip line of that tree with the hydrogen peroxide. Is that going to stop the rot? Kind of. It'll sterilize the end between where it has rotted and where there's new growth, provide a slight boost in oxygen from that peroxide. And that will help sterilize the scenario and kill the fungal activity that's taking place down there. So that's probably the best thing to do to stop it. If it's too dry, I mean, just water it. So when you have a plant that's in trouble, a couple things that we want to do. First thing is make sure that we've covered our soil. Chop and drop. Add chopped up leaves, add Mexican sunflower, add pigeon pea, moringa branches. I wouldn't even worry about burying them. I would just get the branches, the green branches, and go 8 inches deep. Chop and drop specifically around the drip edge, or you stay away from the trunk. Most of the roots of the tree that are absorbing nutrients are at the drip edge. They're not right around the trunk of the tree. So focus around the edge there. I would say the second thing that I would do is prune the tree back using the scratch test. So on the branch, use your fingernail and scratch it. If it's brown, it's down. If it's green, it's good. If it's brown, it's down. Green, it's good. So if it's brown, prune those branches back until you get to a green center on the branch. This will do a couple things. One, taking off that dead will prevent any rot from going further into the heartwood or damaging the cambium layer where the nutrients and the moisture are being exchanged. Second thing that pruning does is it stimulates the tree with a plant hormone that basically says, bro, you're in trouble, fix yourself. So it really tells the tree, I'm in trouble. I gotta do something. I need some help. So it stresses the tree in order for that tree to help repair itself, because sometimes it doesn't know that it's in trouble. So you can help it along a little bit. So prune until you get back. But then that also is going to relieve some of the stress of that plant, including taking off leaves that are damaged. If the leaves are yellow, and browning and they're crunchy, they're not going to fix themselves. So take them off. Don't let the tree think it needs to keep sending energy to those leaves. They're not going to fix themselves. If the leaves still have green on them, definitely leave some of them. I typically don't want to remove more than 1/3 to half of a tree in danger if I don't have to. The tree does need some leaves for photosynthesis, so it does need some. So don't remove every leaf. Do not defoliate it at this point. The third thing that I would do is give it a hospital-style plant shade, specifically on the southwest side. So put up a tarp between 2 T-posts, or a used bed sheet or a blanket or something, just to give it a little bit of shade protection, and that's really going to help it. And then the last thing that I would do, consider some type of a root stimulator. I really like the one by GS plants, and I'll provide a link to that in the description on the YouTube video. So I do not make kickback from that, by the way. So that's what I would do on the tree that's in trouble. And then wait and see, pray, send it all the good vibes, but don't be a hover parent. I would do those couple things and then step back and just watch it. Question number 9, we have 2 more questions. What are the best plants to clarify water in a pond or in a tank, specifically to prevent algae? So I would preface this with, there's a whole document, a PDF document, best native plants for water, that is available to Patreon members, specifically those that are abundance tier. There is also a free trial version of that. So if you're new to Patreon, try it for 7 days, download everything, binge watch, whatever, you're not out anything. So I would say first refer to that document. Short answer, I would say, first, consider that algae is not bad. Algae keeps oxygen a lot of times in the water, and it is nutrient dense. So algae is really good for cows. It's good for horses. It's good for goats and sheep many times. All the time, no. Red algae usually is bad. Think of it like blood. Green algae is usually pretty good. So even though it doesn't, quote, look pretty to the human eye, it's not always a bad thing. So I would say that's a good place to start. Consider doing things that are going to add, though, oxygen and layers of green matter to the pond. So I would say at the bottom level, what are maybe a plant or two that you could do at the base of the pond that will grow up, that will help bring oxygen up to the surface? And there's a whole list of those. And then consider your mid layer. How do you keep the water moving and keep oxygen? Maybe a couple fish, maybe some tadpoles. I would not do goldfish, because goldfish don't have a proper stomach, and they can create an imbalance in the water that can actually be harmful to cattle and livestock. And so I don't want to increase the ammonia that's in the water, or the nitrite and nitrates. But just consider maybe some native fish or some native tadpoles. Pull them out of the river or stream, throw them in, see what happens, and they will help move the water and bring some oxygen back. Also consider the top layer, duckweed. Duckweed is amazing. It is so good for cattle. It's good for horses. Duckweed is great for chickens. Technically, it's an edible food, for humans. It's pretty high in protein, actually. So duckweed is a great way to cover the top. So for example, if you're a cattle farmer and you have a water tank, or you have a horse tank that is in a pasture that's not being utilized right now, throw in some duckweed on top of it and just let it cover it. And when you're ready to rotate the animals back in, let the horses and cows just eat it off the top and you'll be fine. Or scoop it out, take it to the tank, the water tank in the pasture you just rotated from, and that will help prevent the algae blooms in between rotations of cattle. But I think the key at the end of the day is aeration, keeping the water moving, keeping oxygen in the water by plants, by fish, by movement. If you need to put in a little bubbler at the bottom, those are all going to help bring oxygen to the soil. But I would say oxygen to the water. But it's not a one-tiered approach. Don't just put in a bubble stone, or an air stone. Don't just do duckweed. Layer your approach at the bottom, in the middle, and even at the top of the soil. Or of the water, gosh. Number 10, how far from the house or from a building should I plant fruit trees? I would say the 2 main things that we want to be thinking about are the foundation of our house or the foundation of the structure. We don't want roots going underneath. One, because where are they going to get the water from under there? From your pipes. So don't do it so close to the foundation that they're going underneath, and we don't want it to be cracking the foundation over time. But really, utilities are the big one. So before you dig, no matter where you're from in the US, 811 from your phone will get you a utility locator service that will help scan specifically between the pole and the house. Are they going to do between every single structure that you have on your property? Sometimes, especially if you tip them or give them some free eggs, but sometimes they won't. So sometimes it really does depend. You can hire an independent contractor that will scan for utilities, or you can just risk it. But I would say the best case scenario, before you put in any new plants, even if you like think you know your property, still do it. Still do it. I've had so many times we'll go to an installation getting ready to put in a food forest, and the client will say, no, I know this property. I've been here for 20 years. Go ahead and dig there. And, I make them sign a waiver, and we tell them it is your responsibility to call 811, provide the PDF to me. Had a couple times where we dig and, there's an old abandoned sprinkler system, or there's an old abandoned line that we had no idea was there. Remember, you're not the only one to have ever stewarded that property. So dialing 811 is more of a why not. So in general, once you've scanned for utilities, fruit trees and bamboo, I would say 15 to 20, 20 is our goal, away from a building, structure, or utility. Utility, I'm also including septic fields or a septic tank or a docent tank. So 15 to 20 feet on fruit trees and on bamboos away from structures or away from utilities. Berry bushes and shorter things, 10 to 15 feet. So they don't need to be quite as far. Their root systems are not nearly as aggressive, but still 15 to 20 feet away with berry bushes from a structure, especially if they have aggressive root systems. Now, there are some bushes that don't have very aggressive root systems. They stay within the footprint of the plant. Those, I would say, are very safe and appropriate to put around the edge of a house. Because remember, the main goal is we want to provide shade, especially in the summer, on those houses. So bushes are better than trees directly around the houses, specifically 10 feet around the houses. Wildflowers, herbaceous plants are generally, I say that carefully, generally okay, even over septic systems, as long as the roots are only going 18 to 20 inches deep. So again, for trees and bamboo, 15 to 20 feet away from a building or a utility. Bushes 10 to 15 feet away from a building or utility. Now, again, there are some that you can plant right next to the building. You're going to be fine. You may not be able to get behind them, but it's not going to damage the structure. But wildflowers and herbaceous plants, grasses, are generally okay to plant over top of those systems. But again, I would always dial 811 first before you plant anything new or before you dig. So those are the 10 questions this month from our Patreon members. The things that we're thinking about, the things that are on our mind this month as we're homesteading, as we're farming, as we're doing backyard food forestry, or just as you're hanging out at your apartment with your little bitty square foot garden out back. Hopefully these items have been helpful to you. If they are helpful, if you would do me the favor of either liking, leaving a comment, even if it's just a thumbs up, or sharing this in a local garden group on social media, that always helps the algorithm and helps this information get out there to those that might find this to be helpful. So as always, thank you so much for taking time to watch or listen and join in to all of this good stuff. Have fun, and I will see you next month in the garden or in the food forest.